Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're chatting with Leanne Burrows. Leanne is an accomplished professional with over 15 years of experience in engineering and oil and gas sectors. Her expertise spans communication, change management, and marketing with a strong focus on fostering partnerships between HR and internal communications teams. Leanne is also pursuing a master's degree in organizational psychology and holds multiple certifications, including Pro-C, change management, and a lean green belt. So first of all, Leanne, welcome to the show. And do you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So like you said, I have about 15 years experience in the communications side of oil and gas. I worked in construction for a long time, specifically with an engineering company. And I've, in the past few years, taken a pretty sharp turn and moved into pursuing my master's degree in organizational psychology. So I'm also a DISC certified professional, and I do some consulting work with a company called X5 on the side, in addition to my work with Sky Eye Measurement, and obviously pursuing that master's degree. And I'm married and have a 2-year-old, so lots going on.
Yes. Yeah, we talked briefly before the show about some of the challenges with having the young ones in daycare and the schedule and all of that. But they keep us busy, but I think they keep us grounded and motivated and all of that stuff. So
yeah.
were you born and raised in Calgary?
No, I'm actually from northern Alberta. I grew up about an hour and 45 minutes north of Edmonton. So
Okay.
I grew up on a farm in northern Alberta, and my dad was an outfitter. So he ran hunting camps. We had several lodges. So kind of grew up in the family business. So farming and outfitting. So very entrepreneurial family. So I have a deep passion for working with entrepreneurs, and
Yes.
I've been fortunate enough to work with some really great Alberta-based companies since then.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you still do some of the backcountry stuff here and there, or you're more city girl now?
Not as much. No. I would never call myself a city girl. My husband is a pilot, and we do a lot of flying. He's very passionate about general aviation, so we try to get out whenever that we can, and still try to spend some time in the bush in northern Alberta. And yeah, love it there.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit maybe about what you're doing with Sky Eye?
Yeah, so I'm the director of communications at Sky Eye. I've been here for actually 5 years this week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. They hired me when they were in the middle of a pretty steep growth curve in 2019, and I was coming in from an engineering background.
Right.
So worked in communications, and then marketing tends to fall under there too. So I've kind of been in charge of the marketing in most of the companies that I've worked at, just by virtue of kind of scope creep. So have worked on marketing and communications here since 2019. My role has changed quite a bit in that I work a lot with HR. I'm a pretty strong believer that communications professionals and HR should always work hand in hand, because it's really our job to keep our fingers on the pulse of internal comms, what's going on with people, engagement. So yeah, I've had some really big initiatives with our HR team in the last year and a half since I came back from mat leave. Sorry, it's actually just been a year. And yeah, continuing to work with them on some pretty cool internal stuff.
What does that integration look like? Because I think you're right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense that HR and communications would logically work hand in hand. So what are some of those things that you'd work on?
So right now we're working on a big initiative for competencies. And essentially what that's looked like is taking kind of 10 to 12 of our key individuals and going through what's called a critical incident technique with them to understand what behavior looks like when it's exemplary and what behavior looks like when it's not so good. And from there, we went through a pretty significant thematic analysis just to analyze that qualitative data, and took that, pulled out our themes, and defined 7 behavioral competencies that we'll use to guide performance management and hiring. So really what that means is creating a lot more clarity as it relates to behavioral expectations at work. A lot of the times people come in and they have a job description, but they have no idea what it takes to succeed in a specific environment. And the reality is that that differs depending on the culture and values of a company. So that's been a really cool one. And that's, required a lot of integration between the two teams.
Yeah, I bet. When you talk about those the 7 sectors or the 7 categories that you talked about there, is that like more on the emotional intelligence side? So there's like the IQ or the technical skills, and you're getting at the emotional side there?
A little bit. So it really, the difference is you can have skills, and skills are easy to talk about. So that can mean, if I'm a designer or an engineer, I might have specific design capabilities. I might be a PN, something like that.
Yeah.
But competencies really mean the more, you referenced the iceberg before. So that's the under the surface stuff. So that means, can I show up and be really diligent and persistent in an environment? Am I truly flexible? Am I truly change oriented? What does that look like? And what does an environment require specifically? A big one that we found is our key people and our most successful employees really understand the ripple effect of their actions. That means every step that they take requires that they understand how that will impact others. We don't want to hire people who don't understand that ripple effect. But again, that's not something that you necessarily see on someone's resume. You really have to assess them for that competency and define what the behavior looks like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Is that things that you can train and work on over time with an employee?
I think that it is. And again, I think what I focus on a lot, specifically as a communications professional, is clarity and expectations. I often talk with our team about performance management, and the saying I always use is, you can't hold someone accountable for an expectation they are not aware of. And you and I were talking before we started recording about the fact that I'm going through a renovation right now. And this is really
not just a renovation, a kitchen renovation.
which is not fun. And it's funny because I was laughing about that to myself last night. It's the reality of differing expectations, and a lack of clarity can cause so much chaos. And again, as a communications professional, through my career, I've seen that over and over and over again. So particularly as I'm working towards my master's degree and as I consider topics for my dissertation, I keep coming back to this accountability and clarity and expectations, and why so many businesses struggle with that. Every business owner you talk to says they struggle with accountability. It's fascinating.
Yeah. It's funny actually. My partner, she said to me the other day that I measure everything, like everything in life. Like I'm a numbers guy by trade, so I'm kind of measuring everything. She's like, "Why do you always like have a number for something? Why do you always measure?" And instinctively, I said to her, "Well, you can't improve if you don't measure it."
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing, right? If you want to understand how you can get better at something, you better have a baseline.
Yeah.
You better set those expectations out for your employees if they're going to go and improve on that. And then you have to be able to track that improvement, which it sounds like is what you're doing, building out those competencies and then assuming that you're able to rate people on that scale so that they can help move up the scale, we'll say.
Exactly.
You see people that are high across the board in all those competencies, or there's typically a couple that people are weaker on?
That's a good question. Again, we're not, we haven't finished this yet, but really the goal here is to talk to kind of our most successful people and understand what it takes, what kind of actions they take to succeed. So I would say the goal is that someone be really high in all these competencies, but I think more importantly, it's paramount that people understand what it takes to succeed. So, we're all human. We all have good days. We all have bad days. But if I don't understand what it takes for me to succeed at work, it's going to contribute to, a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of data that shows, psychological safety is significantly impacted at work if people don't understand what's expected of them. And it pains me when I see people who cannot succeed because they aren't given the appropriate expectations. So It's a work in progress, I would say, for sure.
Yeah. And that's probably universal across companies, right? No matter how big or small, pretty
Yeah.
universal in
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's something I've witnessed my entire career in various organizations. So it's not unique to us or to any organization.
Yes. Yeah. That's the difficult side of business is people and management of people and all that goes into that, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So what's your background? Like how did you say this is what I want to get into? I want to get into change management and communication and all that because I don't envision that you were laying there at 8 years old saying I want to be an agent of change management in an organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny. When I tell people this, they don't believe me, but I was a really not a great student growing up. I went to a really academic school and I really, really struggled in school. And that was tough because that really gives you a confidence hit. So
Yeah.
I went to university in Edmonton, kind of took a couple years meandering general studies, ended up in a public relations program at Frat McEwen University there. When I was there, it was still a college, so it was a while ago. But the long and the short of it is I worked for 2 years at a job that was awful and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I got really lucky. I stumbled upon a position at an engineering firm in Edmonton and it changed my life working in that organization. It really because they saw some of my skill sets and they invested in me and really believed in me. And through that job, I was there for about 7 years and I kind of rose through the ranks. I was hired as, like a marketing coordinator or something. And by the time I left, I was their communications and marketing manager. And I worked on a really large initiative to implement lean in that organization. And it was about a year-long initiative. And my boss, Greg, who, again, changed my life, he kind of just let myself and our HR manager and another colleague of mine take this initiative and run with it. And it
Yeah.
got me really interested in change management, although I wouldn't have been able to articulate it at that point.
Okay. So you kind of walked into it without even knowing what you were doing necessarily.
Yeah. And really, again, so much of communication is communicating change, but you're only scratching the surface when you're sending out an email, and there's ways to do it, and there's models to follow. So I moved on to another firm when I moved to Calgary and then ended up at Sky Eye. And, I guess as I continued to work here and continued to work with, an entrepreneur who's really driven and a visionary, I got, quite invested in the communication side of things. And then COVID hit. And if you talk about communicating change, try being the person who has to watch every single announcement that the government was making and try to communicate it with our team while
Yeah.
you're working at home. So I got certified as a ProSci change management professional in that time, which is a certification that I would recommend to absolutely anybody. It is invaluable. It's globally recognized. It was, maybe a week. And I took that and I had been thinking about a master's degree for quite a while, but I didn't want to do an MBA. That didn't get me too excited. So I took the certification. The years passed. I had our daughter, and I think 2 months into mat leave, I got bored. And
I hear
I
you.
was
Yeah.
like, you know what? If I don't start now, I'm never going to start. So I had heard about organizational psychology. I mean, we all know who like Adam Grant is. I'm a absolutely voracious podcast listener. So I listened to a bunch of interviews with psychologists and I love psychology. If there's one thing about me, I want to know how, what makes people tick.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a psychologist because I love business.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I ended up finding a program that I worked through. And again, my grades from university, not good. My professional experience has been what it is because I have worked so hard. And I
Yeah.
learned that from my dad. My dad's a farmer. He's a grade 10 dropout. He's owned multiple businesses. He's the hardest working person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
He grew up on a farm, hard work. And
Yes. Yeah.
so I think that's a very meandering answer, but I didn't wake up one morning and decide that's what I wanted to do. I was given opportunity and I worked really, really hard. I had to write an appeal to get into my master's program because I don't have the appropriate undergrad. I didn't have the appropriate marks. I had to write an appeal and then another appeal. I had to get letters of references, but I was like, I'm doing this. if it
Yeah,
kills
I'm
me.
getting in. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so here I am. I'm a couple classes away and a dissertation short.
Awesome. So what's more difficult, the doing your master's or doing the kitchen reno?
Kitchen rental for sure. Yeah, master's is a breeze compared to that.
Yeah, for those that have not done a kitchen reno, they're so bad because it's like the center of your house.
Yeah,
Everything runs through your kitchen. If you have a bathroom reno, it's okay because you probably have another bathroom.
exactly. Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
have another kitchen.
I think it's taken a couple years off my life, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. What type of skill set do you think you have that's really helped you flourish in this type of a career, in this type of a role?
Yeah. You know what? My old boss used to say this about me, and I think Richard, my current boss, would say too, forgive the language, but I get shit done.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
it's actually to my detriment sometimes that I cannot let things go because it's bordering on neuroses sometimes. But if I start something, I have to finish it.
yeah.
Um, honestly, I'm a pretty creative person, and I think you have to be really creative as it relates to internal initiatives and engaging people because things change really fast. We have a lot of different demographics internally.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm also just really curious about people. You know, if I meet you, I have like no interest in small talk. I want to get to know how you got where you are, what's happened, what's been hard along the way. So I really just strive to understand people. And, you know, you have to have a desire to keep learning. And a lot of, I do that. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I
Mhm.
don't read a ton of business books or anything like that because I read a lot of textbooks as it is. But if I drive somewhere, I go back and forth to Edmonton a lot. And,
Yeah,
I always listen to a podcast. I
yeah.
ask other people what they're listening to. So just curiosity.
Hmm. And of course, this one will be on your playlist as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Follow, like, and subscribe.
I've never said that on the show, never once. I think this is like maybe the 55th recording or 60th recording. I've never once said it. So you broke the boundary on that one. Um, Communication is always a tough one in businesses, and change management certainly is very tough within organizations. What does that look like when you've got, and I've asked this question to different people, so it's always kind of fascinating because usually people have fairly common answers on it, but what does that change management communication look like when you have multiple generations within an organization?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking about this morning. When you work in a private business and you have a sole owner or maybe two owners, you don't answer to a board. You're not answering to multiple shareholders. You get to choose how much you share. And
Yeah,
I always say, in the absence of transparency lives conjecture. And what I mean by that is that people will jump to conclusions. And I
mhm,
have said that dozens and dozens of times. I think it's less about generational differences. I kind of balk at this idea that we're all so different. I understand that maybe we show up a bit differently at work, but I really believe that at the end of the day, people want to know what's in it for me, which is the classic like with them that people use.
yeah,
So, and they want to understand what it takes to succeed, how my day-to-day life is going to be impacted,
mhm,
and can I show up and flourish, at work. So as it relates to communicating change, every single person wants to know how change is going to impact their day to day. And, I have had some people say to me, like, oh, millennials or Gen X or whatever's after us, well, they need to know everything and they need to have their hand held. Well, just because it wasn't the norm to communicate the way that we do to boomers doesn't mean that if
right.
I'm 55 at work and we're going through a merger, I don't care how that impacts me. So
Mhm,
again, I think it's more about our common ground than what differentiates us. I think maybe the medium is what's different. Some people are okay with email. If you're older, maybe you prefer like an in-person conversation. Perhaps the younger generation is fine with just like an email or a text or Teams or
TikTok video.
yeah, exactly. Like a TikTok. Yeah, exactly. But I think we have more in common than we do differentiate than what differentiates us.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fair. Um, what what maybe tips then would you have for And this is probably different for everybody at a different level of the organization. But if you're an employee, if you're, say, supervisor, a manager, an owner, what tips would you have for that individual to be a more effective communicator, to
Mhm.
understand that cross-generational, or maybe even take the cross-generational out? There's
Mhm.
just different communication styles that people like. So how do you uh, train for that, or what tips would you provide somebody for that?
Ask someone. If you're dealing with someone, say, hey, how do you want to communicate with me? Do you want me
Mhm.
to call you? Do you want me to email you? People will have different answers. There's some people who simply can't pick up the phone, and y- that's going to be challenging if you're dealing with somebody who's really busy and has a million emails and you need an answer. Sometimes it's better just to pick up the phone. You'll probably have a more genial conversation over the phone than you will text. People can
Yeah,
misread texts.
yeah,
Conversely, some people, um, maybe only check their WhatsApp, and maybe they're traveling and maybe they just need you to, shoot a text that way.
yeah.
Again, I think as it relates to communicating effectively, I would say keep it brief, keep it to the point, be respectful of people's time, but understand your audience, know who you're talking to, and know how they want to get information. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that it's really simple and people overlook it constantly.
Yeah. Well, I think we're so programmed to know how we like things and how we understand communication, and maybe that even goes back to the change management
Yeah.
side of it, where we have to manage our own change on some of that.
Oh, well, all we do is project what we want on other people. So
Hmm.
it's really hard to take yourself out of that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Mhm.
Um, you're obviously busy with work. You've got a young family.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the daycare drop-offs and
Mhm.
pickups, and you've got a husband that's in a busy career as well. Sounds like he's gone traveling or flying, I should say, not traveling, flying with his work quite a bit as well. How do you deal with the balancing of all of that, balancing the work, the life, the family, the oh yeah, sorry, I forgot you're doing a master's as well.
Yeah, that's such a funny question, and everybody gets asked that. And my husband says this a lot, and he often says, sometimes we'll be balanced and sometimes we won't be. I think the trick is understanding how long you can sustain imbalance. Honestly, just coming from a working mom, flexibility. When I came back from my mat leave, I had a conversation with my boss about that. So I work really flexible hours. I don't work full time. I can't. It's way too much. Um, and having that opportunity is such a game changer because I know I can show up and do what I need to do. I've cut out a lot of the fluff. I just
Yeah,
I don't try to spread myself too thin there. That said, it's really hard and it requires a very supportive partner. My husband takes our daughter all the time so that I can do schoolwork. I also do a little bit of consulting work on the side, which is, which I'm very passionate about. But I would say you have to be so honest with yourself about what you have to give up. Because speaking from experience, when you keep adding, it's not a good situation to be in.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of pressure to do all the things, and we're doing ourselves a huge disservice when we try to do everything. So
yeah.
it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and it's kind of accepting that, like, in those moments where you feel balanced, you stop and you're like, oh man, I've got balance right now. And then when you get sucked back into imbalance, you have to let go of something.
Yeah, work towards getting
Mhm.
back onto that balance
Mhm.
side. Yeah, I always think of, you mentioned something there on, letting things go, or maybe saying no to more things. And
Mhm.
I always think when you're early in your career, or maybe even, you're in university or you're in high school and you're looking to get into a job, that's the time where you should be saying yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. You, like,
Yeah.
say yes to everything at that point because you're young, you probably have no kids,
Yeah.
you got all the time in the world that you need to do things. Say yes, and then I always look at it, think of like the bell curve. Yes, yes, yes. And then you're going to hit a point where it's like, okay, now I'm going to start shedding some of that stuff
Mhm.
off, right? I've done that for a few years. I've done what I needed to and start shedding off. And then you get busy in life and work, and, maybe you start having kids and things like that.
Mhm.
And then as the kids get older, then you can maybe start ramping back up. But then it's more on the passion side versus trying to build a career and that.
Yeah, and I would say too, if you are younger, I agree with you because that's what I did in my 20s and my early 30s. I also think, though, when you're in an environment that doesn't allow you to say no, you are in the wrong environment, because that is a dangerous spot to be in. And we should all be allowed to say, I'm not very good at this. This isn't a good spot for me to be in. And I think organizations should understand that too. And if you work for an organization who just keeps adding and adding and adding and adding and doesn't, let you say no, it's probably not a great spot to be in, and you're going to burn out.
Yeah. The organizations that say how much they believe in work-life balance, but answer your phone at midnight if I call.
Well, yeah, and that's the tricky thing, is it's a really popular thing to say, and a lot of organizations, and this, on the organizational psychology side of things, this is what I'm really interested in, is really that authenticity. What does your environment actually look like? I don't care what your values on the wall say. I think, a lot of organizations like to say a lot of really nice things, but what's the reality of working there? Is it a place that actually supports you as a human being? And I wouldn't say that I'm a big believer in, I don't think you need to work somewhere with like foosball tables and a snack counter. You need to be able to work somewhere that helps you grow as a professional, live a good life as a human being, and do work that you enjoy and find fulfilling. And if I can help organizations achieve that, it's a pretty good spot to be in.
Yeah, definitely. What's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, so hopefully finishing my master's degree. The goal is to finish it within the next year. So I'm working on selecting a dissertation topic right now, and hopefully start that early in 2025. And just working on some really exciting projects with SkyEye as we continue to grow. We're in another really explosive growth curve right now. So managing some internal projects and working with our leadership team to make sure we take care of our people as best we can. We've got a lot of really young professionals that come in through our doors. So for a lot of people, this is their first kick at, real work.
Being a real adult.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to develop something right now called SkyEye University, wherein we interview, key subject matter experts, get them to share their experience. I'm doing a lot of management training with some of our up and coming leaders next month. That comprises like everything DISC certification for managers, up and coming leaders. So it's psychometric testing that helps them to show up at work as best they can and better understand themselves. So yeah, lots of really fun stuff.
That's awesome. Well, that's great. If somebody wanted to learn more about what you're doing or maybe connect with you, where would they go for that?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Leanne Burrows, very easy to find, and be happy for anybody to reach out.
Awesome. Well, certainly appreciate you being on the podcast today with us, and wish you guys all the best moving forward. I certainly wish you the best of luck in the Masters and with the young one there.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.